Hi, my name is Brian Leonard, and in this screencast I will demonstrate how to set up a local mirror of the OpenSolaris released repository. Once a local mirror of the IPS repository is in place, commands that depend on the remote repository will run much quicker. This is especially useful at a site with limited bandwidth and/or multiple copies of OpenSolaris running. You take one upfront hit to download the 7 gigabit repository file, after which future requests to the repository run at local network speeds. The first step is to figure out which OpenSolaris machine you want to dedicate as your local repository server. If you are doing this simply for yourself, then it will be your own machine. If you are doing this for an office environment, then it will likely be a machine in a lab somewhere, although it certainly doesn't need to be a dedicated machine. Once you've determined the machine you're going to use, the steps for setting up the repository include creating a new ZFS file system to house the repository, downloading the repository file, extracting the repository to the new file system, and configuring and starting the local package server. Once these steps are complete, you will be ready to configure clients to access the local repository. So let's begin. The first step is to create a new file system to host the repository. In this case, I'm going to use the existing rpool and call the file system repo. Note, I'm turning on compression, which will not only save space, but will also boost performance since today's CPUs can compress and uncompress data faster than the time it takes to read and write the uncompressed data to and from the disk. The next step is to download the ISO image of the repository, which you can get from genunix.org. Again, the download is 7 gigabytes, so your time will vary based on your connection speed. As you can see here, I had to patiently wait about 6 hours for my download to complete. When the download is complete, close the browser and return to the terminal window. The ISO we just downloaded needs to be added as a block device and mounted. These two steps can be combined as you see here. Then use the rsync command to copy the repository to the repo file system we created earlier. Note, this step can take over an hour to complete. OpenSolaris comes with an image package server service that is disabled by default. Before enabling the image package server, we'll make some configuration changes telling it to use the local repository. Unless you plan to dedicate the machine as a local repository server, I would also recommend changing the port from the default of 80. This way you will avoid conflicts with other services such as Apache that like to use that port. I've chosen port 81, but feel free to choose any free port on your system. In the repository, you'll find a config cache file. We need to change the origins property from the default release repository at OpenSolaris.org to the HTTP address of the local machine hosting the repository. The domain name must be reachable by other machines on the local network. The port is only necessary if you changed it from the default of 80. In my case, the domain name is OpenSolaris and the port is 81. Finally, refresh the package server service to pick up the configuration changes and start the server. At this point, the local repository server is ready for use, and you can see I can browse the repository on my local machine. The next step is to configure OpenSolaris client machines to use the local repository as a mirror. With this configuration, the clients will get the benefit of local package access while still allowing them to receive newer packages that might become available in the default release repository. First, looking at our existing set of publishers, we can see that the package.opensolaris.org/release is the default preferred publisher. Now let's use the set publisher subcommand to set our new local repository as a mirror. Running the package publisher command again, we can see the local repository is now properly set up as a mirror. Now the client is configured to use the local repository server. You can now quickly install packages using either the command line or the Package Manager graphical interface. For example, taking a quick look at the Package Manager GUI, you'll notice it behaves just as before. However, package installation will run much quicker. Your clients can also manage the repository configuration from within the Package Manager, so there's no need to direct them to the command line. Simply provide them your local repository's HTTP address and instruct them to modify the repository, adding the HTTP address as a mirror. And this concludes my brief screencast on configuring a local IPS repository mirror. You will also find detailed instructions by clicking the link to the observatory. Thanks for your attention. I hope you found it useful.